Romance. The definition of romance can be defined as either the feeling of love or the search for adventure in life. During the Harlem Renaissance, love was something to behold. Its presence was everywhere, from pages of books by African Americans to the world people would find themselves situated in. Authors, musicians, and artists would use romance in order to have people sympathize and relate with their art, sound, and music themselves, to give them something to look at and find pride within. The three texts I have read this past semester, Passing, Home to Harlem, and The Black of the Berry, managed to combine two definitions of romance into one theme and the main idea. The main characters of each story have traveled a variety of places to live life and search for who they are while being bound by love itself. Going to different places such as Harlem and the experiences they have in these places, positive or negative, help the characters to move forward in life and escape their predicaments. Irene, Claire, Jake, and Emma Lou, and several other characters all experience the main theme of romance as defined by the Harlem Renaissance in both good and bad ways. And that has helped these characters to better understand what it means to be black during that time period in America. Going into the novel of Passing by Nella Larson, there are two main characters who we focus throughout the whole of the story: Irene Redfield and Claire Kendry. These two women struggle at enjoying life, at enjoying the lives they have, and over the course of the plot often strive for more out of life. Irene Redfield is a biracial woman married to a doctor named Brian and has two sons with him. Irene lives the ordinary family life, but throughout the book it is portrayed from a boring to depressing experience. This is what causes Irene to be a complex, neurotic, and somewhat unlikable individual, even unliked by herself. Irene desires a life of elegance and success, so she seeks this through the concept of passing, in which someone of a different group is recognized by another as their own, and through her own friend Claire. Meanwhile, we the readers also examine Claire and her life. Claire has everything that Irene wishes to attain, but has done so by unethical means. Through using the concept of passing to marry a wealthy Caucasian man named John Beale, who is later on revealed to be a bigot with a strong hatred for darker-skinned folk. Claire ignores John's open racism, and she feels that she is secure with herself, looking more white than black, and even has a daughter with the man. Claire is a risk-taker and enjoys life, but lacks the mindset to see that actions have consequences. She embodies the freedom aspect of romance, but takes it to a far extent. Claire tries to have it all: her affluent life in high white society and her ties to the African Americans in Harlem, the latter of which she says is more fun. Claire loving herself and always putting herself first, and Irene embodying envy for Claire and self-hatred towards herself, is what leads to the tragic end of Passing, with Claire's demise and Irene's downward spiral. In Home to Harlem, our main protagonist is Jake Brown, an embodiment of both definitions of romance. Jake Brown is a black man who has served in the U.S. Army before the events of Home to Harlem, traveling the world to places such as London at the beginning of the story. He is revealed to have deserted the U.S. Army to return to Harlem. During his time back there, he hooked up with and laid eyes on several women. Literally, during his first night back, he instantly became drawn towards Felice, a woman who was a complete stranger to him at the time. Even with all the women around him who seemingly were willing to do anything to get with him, Jake disregards them in favor of an unknown woman, that is Felice. Rose, a woman Jake lived with, was close to claiming his heart, but in Jake's mind she paled in comparison to Felice. Jake then secretly leaves Rose to go work on a train track that travels some of the United States. There, Jake met a variety of people, notably Ray, someone who he admires, and the latter in return. Jake continues to go on and do whatever he pleases just for the enjoyment of it, but it then leads to a consequence of possibly contracting an STD and going to the hospital. Jake then reduces his lifestyle and, to his luck, runs into Felice. but unfortunately loses his close friend Zeddy due to a sparked rivalry for love and decides to leave the city he had enjoyed. Jake and Felice go on the train to see the country. Jake's character's actions embody the definitions of romance, adventure, and love. Jake has had no inner conflict with himself other than that he leads a reckless life. However, he managed to win in the end. Claude McKay, the author of Home to Harlem, wants the reader to embrace themselves, take risks when needed, and keep moving forward knowing that nobody has a life that's truly better than another's. Finally, in The Black of the Berry, we follow a young dark-skinned woman named Emma Lou. Emma Lou, throughout all the places she has been, from Boise, Idaho to LA and all the way to Harlem, has been tormented and humiliated, all because of the color of her skin. She is always being dealt a bad hand in life from her family, excluding her uncle, ridiculing the skin tone she inherited from her absentee father. In LA, she tried to find a place to belong, but failed mostly due to her peers not accepting her due to her dark skin. In Harlem, Emma Lou still couldn't escape the burden society puts on dark-skinned individuals because she struggled to land a job due to being passed up for a lighter-skinned woman. Often made fun of while on the streets, forced to move out of her housing and take up a job of being a maid for years, wasting all her years of schooling. Emma Lou also basically allowed some of this stuff to happen to her, as she herself didn't like dark-skinned folk herself, and allowed herself to become a maid for a period of time, while now continuing to search for a job that matches her major. A depressing thing about Emma Lou is that she does seem to find true love in Alva, and the way he approaches Emma Lou seems as if he is actually interested in her as well. He tells Emma Lou the blacker the berry as a way to reel Emma Lou in. A later scene is when Alva is debating with his roommate Braxton, the latter saying that Alva can do better than Emma Lou, to which Alva replies, "The blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice." In part 4 of the novel, he then avoids being seen with Emma Lou in public and soon becomes interested in another woman named Geraldine. Emma Lou has a low self-esteem that is arguably mixed in with pride that she uses to deal with her shame. And it took the whole country of America to show her that her way of thinking is holding her back. It was too later on near the end of the story that she started to make a change for the better. The Harlem Renaissance was a time of romance and reinvention for those of black descent. After the end of slavery, things didn't go immediately well for black folk. Honestly, things still weren't well at all. African Americans had endured centuries of slavery and struggled for abolition. The end of bondage had not brought the promised land many had envisioned. The Great Migration eventually relocated hundreds of thousands of African Americans from the rural South to the urban North. Many discovered that they had shared common experiences in their past histories and their uncertain present circumstances. Instead of wallowing in self-pity, the recently dispossessed ignited an explosion of cultural pride. Indeed, African American was reborn in the Harlem Renaissance. W.E.B. Du Bois stated, honest and earnest criticism from those whose interests are most nearly touched, criticism of writers by readers, of government by those governed, of leaders by those led. This is the sole democracy and the safeguard of modern society. The writers of the Harlem Renaissance, such as Nello Larson and Claude McKay and Wallace Sturman, incorporated realities of being a black person in America through the setting of Harlem, no matter how wacky it may have seemed. In Malcolm X's Who Taught You to Hate Yourself speech, he reminds the audience to not hate themselves because it is all part of the white man's agenda to put themselves on top and stay the standard, while black folk remain at the bottom. The character Emma Lou is a victim of this agenda and can't seem to escape it. She has sadly just learned how to live with it, but not let it hold her back from her success anymore. Malcolm X also stated that the most disrespected, neglected, and vulnerable person in America is the black woman, often never having had the chance to express themselves and not be instantly put down. Beauty standards in America have been accommodating to whiteness and paler-skinned people, leaving darker-skinned individuals in the back constantly looking for a way to get out. However, in these stories, there was little to no white people included within. It seemed as if the writers wanted their black characters to take responsibility for their actions and state that you have no one to blame but yourself. Look at how envious Irene was and Claire's selfishness. Their personalities were comparable to young children. Irene even seems to not take responsibility for what she most likely did to Claire, and Claire, on the other hand, seems to struggle with owning up. Being honest with yourself and owning up is the first step towards redemption and loving yourself. However, this step isn't never an easy one, especially when the world constantly throws obstacles at you or never allows one to leave the past behind in the luxury of letting things go. In New Voices on the Harlem Renaissance, essays on race, gender, and literary discourse by Australia Trevor and Paula C. Barnes, Harlem served as a place of rebirth through a chunk of essays and opinions from other writers, for blacks to take a step towards the best directions possible. A point in the reading discusses the new Negro, someone who is at the center of racial awareness and could declare themselves as reborn and transformed from the stereotypical Negro. All the texts manage to incorporate this concept through certain characters. They grow immature, or at least what's preventing them from making a change. And they realize it. Side characters as well in these stories exemplify the concept too, like Ray from Home to Harlem and Alva from The Blacker the Berry, before the latter's downfall. They received an education from fine schools and both have visited several places, but they still weren't perfect, with Ray not being satisfied with who he is and Alva becoming a failure when it comes to women, falling victim to his flaws. Everywhere the characters went, they would face a challenge, come to a realization, or even mature for the better. The characters within these novels either came to a happy conclusion, bittersweet, or a depressing one. The possibilities of winning and or losing for these characters connected with love, primarily within oneself. Romance was a key factor in the development of these central characters in the text of the Harlem Renaissance. It's what helps the reader place themselves in the text and manage to find relatability to any one of the characters and themes of the story. Serving as a bridge to reality, the theme of romance was also a real-life phenomenon during this time period. With the art present all around the city, music, dancing, and literature, it was invented by a group of people who traveled from faraway places to seek out something brand new and grasp it in their hands.